3 spaces on the screen and only 2 of us. Well, here she is. Phumi Mashiko. Hello,
Good morning.
Yeah, we got a busy day today. There's lots of good stuff happening on the show, among other things. We got Bantu Holomisa coming in a little bit later.
General.
The General. I was asking you how I should address him because it's changed over the years.
Yeah, it must always be Jenene.
Jenene.
Yes, the General. I think that's the Xhosa version of General.
I'll just have to go over it in my head a couple of times because the man, I mean, he's got a history, you know. He's got an incredible history.
And today, what a day to have him here.
Yes.
Because last night, as we went to bed, the Takatso deal has fallen apart.
Mm-hmm.
And he was one of the people. He was one of the people who were front and center in the questioning of that deal. So it'll be interesting to have. That's my first question that I want to hear about, how he's feeling this morning.
No problemo. We'll the floor is yours. We did a little event last night, and Phumi and I were at dinner until 11.
Yeah,
maybe 11:30.
No, it definitely wasn't 11:30 for me because,
sure?
Because when I got home and had to get like ready for this morning, I eventually Leslie, because you are important to us, dear listener. You are important to us, so we have to get ready. And because I've made an effort about the no black. It was easy yesterday.
Let's just be clear, Pumi's not saying that she's cut black people out of her life. She's cut black clothing because she used to be a bit like I've tried it various times in my life. I've never got it right like you did. But for a long time, you were one of those people who always wore black.
I still do, just not on the show.
Oh, okay. So it's part of the...
It's all for you. Is to just...
I don't know. Last night you had some resplendent pink going on in the hair.
I had to like pack out my stuff, but I got home and it was nice. And I'm glad I did though, because this morning when I woke up and there was no lights, my stuff was packed out.
Well, after a very inspiring but extremely long day, I spent like an hour and a half in traffic yesterday morning, which I haven't done for a while. So it was challenging. Let's put it that way. Got home last night in the dark and there was no light. Challenging. I think there's some parts of Johannesburg that have now I don't want to get this wrong because then they'll get even more cross. But you know what? It's now, as I said to JJ Tabani, vol. People in this country are vol.
Yeah.
It's enough. We've had it. Doesn't matter what the governing party, I don't want to call them the ruling party, what they tell us about a good story.
They should never be called. They should never be called the ruling party. No. Nobody, because that's not what they are. They're not rulers. They're government.
Correct. Government. That's my favorite word.
Lendoda.
Government.
Hulumeni.
Okay, so one of the other things that we're going to have today is we're going to have a couple of minutes with a really, really powerful and incredibly talented and really important ad man. Somebody who's been in the business for a long, long time. He knows South Africa's advertising business like the back of his hand. And I think he probably has lessons for all of us. There's going to be a lot to talk to him about. That's Mike Abel popping in a little bit later on. But we've had a really busy week. And Pums is also... doing a little thing that she hasn't done. I once went on a tour of Soweto with Phumi some time ago.
You know, I have a little group on my phone.
That's where I met your parents in that trip.
Remember, I said on the show that I'm happy to take anybody who wants to come. I have a little group on my, and then COVID came and we never went.
Right.
And then at one of the events, Hermine, who's a regular in the comment section, came up to me to say, you know, I was one of the first people that responded to that thing. And so I resuscitated it and I have a little group. Do you know what the biggest thing has been with that group? Getting all of us together on a single day and there's only 9 of us. There's only 9 people in that group and we can't agree on it. Then the holidays are coming and then this and that.
And people can't agree. And also, I mean, this is why whenever you get family gathering together, whenever you manage to get more than 4 or 5 of your friends together in one place, whenever
That's
you
why
manage
it takes
to,
like 6 months.
yeah, anybody who's in the event business, I just want to give you some credit today, because pulling off an event, we had like 110 people at this thing we did yesterday, which more of which you will hear about.
Even that
in
many.
time.
It was a
It's a hard thing to
It is.
wrangle people, and there were some very important, very busy people there. There were some people who are prolific as hell. They're writers and they're thinkers, and there were people there who are captains of industry.
Yes, I did quite a lot of celebrity spotting.
There was a bit of that going on yesterday too. So we'll tell you about that in time. I'm not leaving anyone out, I promise, because the most important people in the world for us are the people who are listening to this show, and you'll get first glimpse of any of that stuff. So I don't want to spoil it by talking too much about something which sounds ethereal and numinous and not clear at this point. We'll get to exactly what it is and share it all with you shortly.
I am excited about the trip this morning. I am excited about the trip this morning because I haven't done it in a long time. And 2 days ago, on Tuesday,
I
actually went on a little recce.
Oh yeah? Oh
yeah,
you've been preparing.
I went on a little recce. I went because then I suddenly thought, you take these things for granted, right? You drive past a place, I was like, I wonder if they opened after COVID. Let me go in.
That's a good check.
Let me go in. I wonder if they've cut the weeds.
Well, I know when I went on that tour, and Phumi, by the way, in case you don't know, the Sowetan newspaper was named after her. That's how she knows the place. So first time I went, and the only time I've been on that tour, because it's a one of a kind, we went to your parents' house. It was the first time I had a magwin, which I remember very well. We went down and you told me where they get it from the shop down the road.
And we went to the shop down the road.
We had the authentic experience. None of this tour bus full of like people with cameras from Japan stopping at like Hector Peterson's memorial, and this is the real thing. So a fascinating little detour. I mean, I've been to Soweto since then, but if I hadn't had that orientation with you, wouldn't have made any sense. So we got lots to get to this morning, and plenty in the news too. I don't know where you want to start this morning for me. You brought up Kate Middleton the other day.
I have to, Gareth. I have to.
Yeah,
because it is now the last thread holding me onto X.
Oh God,
is waiting for
Kate Middleton. Really, I mean, of all the things, I thought that. I've said for the longest time that this Kate Middleton is thank God she's the sanity. She's the only person in that royal family who behaves like a royal.
Wow.
No, despite not being born in the family, I've always thought she's classy as hell. She's got her shit together.
I am not a Kate fan, so let's just start there. But I have to, this is what I need to actually talk to you. Do you know about Uktwala? Do you know what that is? When you use magic to attain your wealth, right? One of the things about it, Uktwala, you have to.
This is what Gogo Maweni and Gogo Skoteni.
Yeah, that's what all of those.
They're very good at doing this stuff. Yeah. Well, supposedly.
Yeah. But But in that realm, in that world.
Sorry, when we learned about customary law at university, that's how long ago it was called customary law, for example. I mean, Ukutwala was a system
that is
where there was payment in form of cattle, in those days, or if a man abducted a girl. Yeah. Okay, so I'm not completely off the mark here.
That is a different type of Uktwala.
Yeah, and then that was like a compensation
which still happens where in the Eastern Cape, in Lesotho, in those areas, it's still a practice where a young man or old man might see a young woman that they fancy, and then they the Sotho word is to shubedisa.
Just take it.
And then they take the girl and take her to wherever their family homestead.
And the family, right? Then they can actually go, hey,
where's my child?
Where's my child? I mean, it's just unbelievable. But then in compensation, customary law forces those people to make payment and to return the girl if certain standards aren't met.
So, but this Ugutwala, there was some time ago on Twitter, there was when it was still Twitter, a whole thing about the snake, about people who have a snake, which is what gives them their money. So Ugutwala is also about that. It's
again,
about
gogo maweni.
About this attainment of wealth using paranormal.
Yes.
But the thing about Ugutwala is it comes with a pet, right? Whether it's a snake,
like a familiar,
or
a witch is familiar,
like a familiar. But if you die and you haven't selected somebody in your family to pass on this familiar to, and then it's got nobody looking after it, and it gets hungry because they must be fed, and what it will do is it will take your wealth with it. So as it shrivels up and dies, it'll take everything that you had attained. So your family won't have the same level of wealth and prosperity because they're not taking care of the pet. Just stay with me.
I'm totally with you. In fact, so far I'm knee deep in it. I mean, I believe this is probably a good reason for pets to be looked after, if nothing else.
So Lizzie,
the queen,
did she have a?
She had corgis.
Did she have a snake? Was she?
She had a snake. I mean, you could say that they're reptilians.
Had one?
No, well,
that she was, and she forgot to pass it on and the care instructions to Charles, and so now Charlie hasn't been doing what he's supposed to be doing, and now the snake is taking back.
What is it?
It's wealth and prosperity and bringing down that entire.
I've got to tell you, like, that's a great theory because I've heard no good theories up to now. And I'm sorry for those people who don't give a damn about the royal family, because in this particular instance, I don't either. But I see this stuff going on. I mean, I've seen respectable people. I interviewed Brendan O'Neill the other day. Consider him a smart guy. He had to write an article about Kate Middleton. And he's not the kind of guy who would. And I suddenly thought, this is something that I maybe should try to figure out what's going on here. So she went into hospital for routine abdominal surgery at some point. That's what they said.
And then they should be recovering till after Easter.
Yeah, they mentioned that she'd taken till Easter before she resumed her duties. I thought, that's a long time.
That is a long
she's a mother
time
of three.
For an abdominal.
Sure, she's mother of three. She's she's busy. I mean,
and advanced in age.
Well, to say that, I think she's younger than me, so just careful what you say, and you. She's got a lot to do because, as we discussed in a previous discussion around this very thing, I can't believe we've had more than one. There are only about 4 really working royals at the moment because they can't use Andrew because he's friends with Epstein. They can't use Harry because he and Meghan are in America. So they're down to like a skeleton staff in the royal family.
And now, after like 3 engagements,
Camilla's needed a break. Leave. She's like, I need a ciggy and a glass of whiskey and I'm out. Charles has got the cancer scare, so he's also out for a lot of this stuff. So it's like William and like Edwin and Sophie. I mean, people are like, who? They're holding the fort. So people are speculating that something really mysterious has happened, and Kate is.
So there are Reddit threads.
Go on.
When there's a Reddit thread, then it's
enlightenment.
Gadovas. And I only fell into that kind of rabbit hole a couple of days ago. That actually Kate hasn't been seen since like Christmas Day.
Oh.
So they had a Christmas walkabout of some sort. And then that's it. She hasn't been seen since then. There are videos of a little like convoy, a royal convoy leaving one of the palaces on the 28th with an ambulance.
Sure.
I'm telling you guys.
There's a lot going
in
on
those
here.
corgis that old Lizzie used to like run around with. One of those corgis, because I know they say it's a snake, right? But it can be anything.
Can be any animal.
I'm telling you.
Well,
I'm telling you, Ubetwele. And now that she's gone, nobody's looking after her, and it's all crumbling down. And she got it from her dad, and she looked after it.
she
and
didn't hand it on.
This is why she did not want to give Charles.
Let this be a lesson to anyone who is not preparing for their succession
Just tell
plan.
your family where your stuff is.
And your succession plan in work, everywhere.
Yeah.
Keep your shit together. Look, I don't know how much of this is true and how much is nonsense. We'll probably find out in due course, because they can't hide things forever. But they have been odd. And then there was this photo that appeared. Promise we'll move on after this. There was this photo that appeared. No, I had to go down the rabbit hole. Don't laugh at me. I can't believe
I'm with you.
in a week that I've been so busy, and I've been doing really, really cool stuff, and I have to fucking read about Kate Middleton and her. Anyway, there's this photo that came out where they've seen like there was some photoshopping being done, but like minor little bits and pieces.
It's not minor.
Okay, well, you describe it. I don't know anything about photoshopping. I really don't.
Badly photoshopped. And the fashion girlies actually have cracked this one, where the picture of, because it was Mother's Day in the UK.
It was Kate and her 3 kids.
It was Mother's Day in the UK on Sunday. So she posted a picture of herself with the 3 kids. Happy Mother's Day, everyone. And it was this was supposed to be the image that placates all of us, following the disastrous image of her in the car, where everyone was like, is she bloated? Is that her? Is that Papa?
Jesus.
Is that...
Okay.
This could all be solved.
If they showed us the original photo.
No.
Because that's what Piers Morgan was screaming for. He's like, publish the real photo.
If she just had a small show up and wave at the people, even if she's sitting in a wheelchair, for crying out loud. She gave birth, and within like 6 hours, she was standing outside with the little baby, like with some makeup. And if she could do that, she could like show up and just wave at the people after minor abdominal surgery.
There is I don't know how to answer this, because that's made it more complicated. And Pumi's right. Like, if there's an easy solution to this, why not use it? The other thing, and I hate to admit this too, because I got home late last night, tired, and I was sitting in bed and replying to messages that I hadn't had a chance to all day. We all go through this. I'm not looking for any sympathy. But then I got railroaded by another story, which Candace Owens was talking about yesterday. You heard about this? Brigitte Macron? So, wait, what's happened to my camera here? So, I don't know what to say about this one. So, Brigitte Macron, that's Emmanuel Macron's wife.
Oh,
she is a man, according to
Candace.
No, not according to Candace. According to other people on the internet.
Oh, Candace.
Yeah. Pumi.
Candy baby.
No, Pums. And she said, look, not her theory, but she went down a rabbit hole. And she's now found, like, there are pictures of Macron's wife when she was very little. She's a 70-year-old woman or something.
Oh, Candy baby.
And they're saying, she could have been a man. She could have been a man. Emmanuel Macron's wife could have been a man. I mean, really, I don't know what to say to this.
And Candace is now, but she's digging in.
She's going there. She's going all the way in. I don't know what to make of the world.
I'm ready for the aliens.
Kate's face is swapped from Vanity Fair cover she appeared on a few years ago. If you're that sick, you won't be wearing skinny jeans. Good heavens, what a theory about the royal family.
Guys.
He's married to a man, says Mutande, who's also clearly in on that. I've seen the photo. It's really not that bad, says Carl. Also, who gives an actual fuck about a photo, really? Hey, people do.
Carl.
Who cares, says Arthur. Boring and bloated. They're all boring. Let's not forget what happened to Princess Diana. Respect her privacy. Let her rest, for God's sake. You act like asses, says Marnie. You know what?
No. No.
People aren't going to leave them alone. And if they want to put this away for good, as Piers Morgan said, just show us the original photo.
But because the original photo, so the big hoopla about that particular photo and the fact that it was manipulated, you know how everyone talks about the AI and the images and the fingers and all of that. So that was one of the stuff, the sleeve, the photoshopping, the face, the this, the this, all of that. What she was wearing, because also they are people, guys, we just need to shut down every investigative police service in the world, and we need to like let it loose on Twitter. They will always find the pieces, they'll find the truth, they'll find the girls, the fashion girlies on TikTok are the ones that were speaking about the top that the girl was wearing, Charlotte, the top that she was wearing, and how it was actually photoshopped and made darker because that particular sweater is only made in one color. And it's, if nothing else, it's entertainment, people. It's entertainment.
Well, I've had enough. And I promise you, we've only scratched the surface here of what you're going to find on the internet if you go into either of these things. The Kate Middleton reality show or the Brigitte Macron, which has just started. So there's going to be a lot of that. Unbelievable. So I'm so glad. I say this with dripping sarcasm. I'm so glad you brought me into the Kate world. You wanted to talk about Edwin Sodi. You wanted to talk about Edwin Sodi. A lot of people want to talk about Edwin Sodi. What's going on here? What's going on here?
You know, it's getting harder and harder to be.
How do you finish that sentence?
To be optimistic.
Yeah.
And believe in process and justice and Edwin Sodi, guys. Edwin Sodi is. So a couple of weeks ago, you would have heard that his assets, including his house, were taken by the asset forfeiture unit.
Yeah. Those guys haven't been doing a lot for a while, have they? They've been quiet.
Well, they've been part of they linked with the SIU. They've been doing quite a lot of work, kind of recovering. Pardon me, monies scammed out.
Just remind everybody who Edwin Sodi is.
So Edwin Sodi. Herman Mashaba spoke about Edwin Sodi here last week as well, and the deal that he got from Swane to build a water reticulation system and purification, blah, 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 which is why there's still a problem. He got the deal. He got paid some money up front, still hasn't been built, amongst other things. So Edwin Sodi is a tenderpreneur with a whole lot of dodgy deals over the years from various places. So he's a multi-millionaire. There is an incredibly, amazingly beautiful house in Bryanston.
Yeah.
That has a view of Joburg that is
to die for. Doll.
Yeah. To die for. With an infinity pool, and it's got like a koi pond with 100 koi. It's everything.
Sure.
This is one of those. Remember when we still had top billing? This is one of those like top billing type houses. That house of his with 75 million rand was seized by the asset forfeiture unit a couple of weeks ago, and he was losing his cars. He also, as these people do, have a penchant for vehicles.
Oh yeah, big time.
Right. Mm-hmm. Yesterday reported in the news, this man has apparently gone back to the asset forfeiture unit and for cash, 75 million rand cash, has purchased back this
his stuff.
No, not all his stuff, but the house definitely. I was so mad.
Why?
Because why are his assets not frozen? When we know that this man has no other employment, when we know that all his money has been made under all of these dodgy deals, why is there a bank that is accepting? Because he didn't have this money. 3 weeks ago. So now he has it all of a sudden. Where did it come from? Who sent him the money? What bank is accepting this money? And why is there no ping somewhere on a computer?
Why do we do FICA? Why do we bother with all this stuff?
You must just forget to submit your FICA document to FNB.
You'll be in big trouble
for 2 months.
But
they
this
will
guy
freeze
this
everything.
guy can get stuff back from the assets forfeiture unit.
Cash, 75 million rand cash. Buying his house back. I am so mad and that's why I'm saying it makes it harder to believe in justice, to believe in this country having people who want to do the right thing, whether they are in government, whether they are in private sector, because there's a lot of people in this chain, right? There's a bank is a private business.
Sure.
They're part of this team.
But it again shows you that there are two South Africas, not in the way that Thabo Mbeki said. Because Thabo Mbeki used to say there are two South Africas. There's, rich people in the first world, and he said they're poor people in the third world.
Funny, I thought about that today,
this
morning.
But Thabo Mbeki's version is a bit simplistic because actually there are rich and poor South Africans. The difference is that the law applies completely differently. And if you are very wealthy and very influential and very connected, you don't even when they come to seize your assets, because they are the law, you can buy them back because you have that much money and that much clout. I mean,
I'm very mad.
Must be good to know Edwin Sodi, though.
I was actually so pissed off yesterday, which is it's hard to get me to that place where I'm actually so pissed off that I am unable to what are you doing?
I'm just trying to get your
so the people can see the radio in the
no, because they want to see you in all your glory.
But it's really, really hard to get me to that place where I'm so mad and so angry and so disappointed.
Well, I'm sorry I brought it up then. Okay? I'm sorry I brought it up.
But now the people can also be mad with me.
Well, if you have something to say about Edwin Sodi, of course, let us know. So Arthur Cedric Meyer, let me get it right, says Sodi's house with a view of Johannesburg. What the hell? As far as there's not much of a view in Johannesburg, says Arthur. Who wants the view of a shithole? Arthur, you're looking for trouble, huh? We will not have... I presume Arthur lives in some glorious part of Cape Town.
Arthur, we will shut your mic off.
Yeah. But okay, go for it. Rules for thee and not for me, ne? Says Congo Chris. Correct. Okay, well, I want us to turn our attention to somebody who's popped in all the way from beautiful Cape Town to see us, but he's no stranger to Johannesburg. The founder and executive chairman of MNC Saatchi Abel, which is a marketing and advertising group for the Africa region. Non-executive chairman, Irish-based innovative AI research firm SENS. Amazing that you could find some time to be with us. Mike Abel, how nice to see you. And thank you for coming, by the way. Thank you.
It's a lot for a Cape Townian to be up and dressed up and in the studio at this time of the morning. Well done to you.
It's great to be here.
Don't give him a hard time about being Cape Townian. No, Mike, it's really nice to talk to you. I mean, you're a legendary ad man, but there's so much more that we want to talk to you about. And I'm curious about, your book, which the last time we had you on, we were doing something to do with like who we really are as South Africans.
Yeah.
And we've had a bumpy road the last couple of years.
Sure have.
But you've written this book called Willing and Able, which I thought was really interesting, and it was timeless, and I think it helped a lot of South Africans to kind of figure out where they are in the current mess or opportunity that we're in. And you said the subtitle was Lessons from a Decade in Crisis. So for people who haven't read the book and where your thoughts are now, add the new chapter that you've probably been working on in your head, but also tell us what the book was about and why you brought it out at that time, because I think it's a good place to start.
Fantastic. Thanks. So I came back from running the MNC Saatchi group in Australia towards the end of 2009. I had co-led the Ogilvy group prior to going to Australia. And when I got back, there was enormous excitement in the country around the World Cup that was coming up, and so much hope for the country, albeit obviously that we had the Zuma presidency, if you can call it that, at the time. And I started my company from scratch in a downturned economy, in an overtraded market. And I believed in South Africa. I believed in the economy. I thought I was going to be able to create something, and we have. But I guess what I wanted to do was to capture not just the successes, but the trials and tribulations, I guess, in starting a company from scratch.
Sure.
In believing that there is still great opportunity to do something meaningful in South Africa, because aside from the Rugby World Cup, people were down. At the time, we had load shedding. Fortunately, scrap that.
Yeah, Phumi got home to it last night and woke up to it this morning. So did I. So yeah.
Oh no. And we had corruption at the. Okay, I'll scrap that. We had so basically, the picture I'm painting is that for the last, I've been back 14 years now, and the problems that we encountered then are the same problems we have now. And yet people have muddled on with their lives. Some people have built fantastic companies. You know, kids have got great educations, albeit obviously the massive challenges in education. So I really wanted to bring a bit of perspective to it in terms of there is always an opportunity to make something, to create something, to grow something, if you lean into the positive. And I guess what we're seeing right now is the last 5 years, let's say, or going on 6, so much unfulfilled hope and so much unfulfilled promise in the country, and yet all of our underlying assets remain exactly the same. I mean, this is a country waiting to boom. This is a country waiting to give employment to the 50% youth that don't currently have employment, and it's all solvable. It just needs the right people to solve that problem, or to want to solve the problem. I think more is the point.
That's exactly what we need to hear this morning, because there are plenty of us who are we can so easily be pulled into the negative.
Yeah.
And look, there's a difference between being sensible and realistic.
Yeah.
And not hiding your head in the sand when you see bad things, or pretending everything's going to be all right and whistling past the graveyard. But the only people who make the world better are the optimists, because if we just listen to the pessimists, we would have no reason to carry on. We'd all just be mired in depression. So you want to get things done. You want to make your 100%. Life better. You want to make the world better. You have to be a little bit optimistic. And what I like about people like you, and there are few and far between, I'm afraid, is that you give us that renewed sense of hope. And we've got to keep believing in ourselves. If we don't, who the hell else will?
Yes. Well, I mean, all innovation comes out of a problem.
Sure.
So anything new, anything fresh that is born is the product of a problem. And so if you run towards a problem, you can solve that problem. If you run away from it, it's going to chase you like a bully and it's going to beat you. And so if we focus on our problems and we run towards them collectively, and that is a big problem in our country, I guess, is that we run at things not collectively. Yeah. So we are so divided and so split in how we come at problem solving. And if we just put differences aside, and there's far more that unites South Africans than divides them. So if we could just focus on what unites us, our wanting to educate our children, our wanting to have great healthcare, our wanting to have jobs, our wanting to iron out corruption or gender-based violence or crime, we'll solve those things. But it's like the Tower of Babel. You know, we all seem to be divided around things. So hopefully South Africans will start coming together to solve problems, and we are great problem solvers.
Yeah, there's a resilience that's also our biggest enemy in some ways, right, Phums?
It absolutely is. But, you know, when you talk about a country waiting to boom and so much unfulfilled potential, for you having come back and then built the business, because it was a big business.
Yeah.
When you arrived, I remember being in advertising. Yes. I remember a quote in, I think, Financial Mail or something, saying that, you know, you've built a runway.
Yes.
A big runway, and you want to land big jets.
Yes.
Do you think we still, and having come from Ogilvy, do we still have big jets to land on this runway here in South Africa? Because we don't have brands of our own anymore.
Yeah.
Even
That's an interesting question.
Even SAB doesn't,
It's
is
not a-
now in this.
Yes. Well, we certainly do have brands of our own. If you have a look at certainly the largest client in my group is Standard Bank, the largest bank on the African continent, and a South African brand. If you have a look at probably one of the most famous advertising brands, if not the most famous that we have in our stable, is Nando's. A great South African brand that has gone on to conquer the world. So I think that when you look around, certainly in terms of the telco space, and you look at the size and the scale of an MTN, and you have a look at our banking and various industries, absolutely we do. But where you are right is I don't think that people are investing enough in building homegrown companies. And we have astonishing companies in South Africa. From South Africa, you look at Discovery, look at Vitality. This is a country that innovates, for me, to such an extent that if there is a lack of belief, we need to find a way of engaging in a conversation to rebuild that belief. I strongly feel that. And the reason I say that is nothing has really changed in the country other than our attitude. Yes, our debt to GDP ratio has grown. But if you look at the situation we have been in as a country, certainly since 2008, what has really improved? What has really gotten better? There was state capture. Some people say we still have state capture in one shape or another. Yes, the Guptas are gone, but how many people are in orange jumpsuits as a result?
How many are still on the list that the ANC submitted last week?
Well, there you go. But if you have a look at the underlying potential, what do we have? So let me unpack it for you a bit. We have world-leading agri right here in South Africa. We have world-leading banking, telecommunications, tourism, the creative industry. Here we are sitting in a world-class facility that you guys run, and we have freedom of speech, which allows you to do what you do every day.
Thank God for
Exactly, one of the last bastions. So I think that if you have a look at potential and what you can build, you always have to look at the underlying assets. And our underlying assets are profound. We're just not harnessing them correctly. And we also need to challenge government in terms of unnecessary bureaucracy, red tape, the stuff that actually holds us back, so that we do become much more investment friendly.
So I want to talk to you about something that you dropped into conversation yesterday. I hope I'm not jumping the gun here, but you also believe that mentorship is an important part of what the economy needs to be doing to feed back into itself to grow.
Yes.
And young people in this country may be in the lucky 40% who've got an opportunity to learn somewhere, to take on a small salary that maybe pays just their transport costs, but they can get in and start learning and have an internship and get ahead.
Yeah.
But mentoring, for those who have been in business for some time and people with the amount of experience that you have, is probably one of the most important pillars that will help these people to get ahead.
Yes.
Young, talented, hungry people in South Africa who are desperate for that opportunity, but once they've got it, they get abandoned again. And they just have to kind of feel their way in the dark.
Yes.
Before they realize whether they're any good or not at something. So mentorship, let's talk about that for a second.
Well, I think there's active mentorship and I think there's passive mentorship. And so the big reason why I started my podcast, which...
yes, it started last week.
Last week, correct, which is, again, called Willing and Able.
Welcome to the podcast world.
Thank you. Good to be here. Was because I realized that I was and am at such an advantage in growing up as I did by having really smart, cultured, interested, good parents and grandparents. And what I used to pick up from them and their friends simply sitting around the dinner table, be it around medicine, because my grandfather was a medical man, be it around business, because my parents were business people, or academia, because my mom was an academic, or whatever it might be. I had all of this amazing and rich conversation. And so I thought to myself, because I've encountered it in business, I employ many hundred people. And I think that a lot of people have got great educations perhaps, but don't get exposed to that level of conversation. So what I wanted to do was to create a passive form of mentorship where I would have fantastic, rich, varied conversations with multiple South Africans, that if you're listening to podcasts, the whole thing is about educating and dropping wisdom, so that throughout the conversation, people would be saying, aha, yes, I never thought about that. Maybe I could solve the problem this way or that way. Then there is, as you say, all of this experience that is out in South Africa. Now, people are forced to retire today because the world is ageist, somewhere between 60 and 65. Those people are mentally vital and they are physically vital, and they are able to add so much value. So there is such an opportunity to unlock this dormant potential in South Africa, where through online platforms and other ways of doing it, we can actually start engaging in active mentorship in South Africa. And that is something that I'm looking at very seriously right now. Because what have you got? You've got the 65-year-old who's run a company, and now he's sitting at home, or she's sitting at home, trying to work out how to fill their day, where there are these hungry and desperate minds on the other side waiting just to absorb all of this. And I think that if we can get behind mentorship as a country, they say a rising tide raises all ships, and we can raise the country's ships. And I think that is something that we should look at. I mean, one of the other ideas I've had for years and years is, I've always wondered why, because we have a problem with orphans in our country, insofar as these children are brought up or dropped off or can't be raised because of poverty in an orphanage. And then 100 meters down the road, or 200 meters, you've got an old age home, and those people are lonely and they are forgotten. And I think that when you look at combinations, why don't you build an orphanage together with an old age home? Because what you've then got is a sharing of needs and love, where old people love young kids and love pouring, attention and affection and values and guidance. Because, to be honest with you, most of these unbelievable values that we have in our country are from the older generation that are passed down. And these kids are just hungry. They're like birds with their mouths open, their beaks open, waiting for love, attention. So I think that if we start looking at problem solving entirely differently, but dare I say logically, we could come to fascinating new models.
I like it. I like it very much. All right.
It's election year.
Yeah. So I knew you were going to go here.
We're 75 days away, guys. 75 days away, I think.
Sure.
More or less. And it would be having a marketing man in studio and not having a conversation about the campaigns would be a missed opportunity.
Sure.
I know you're involved with one, but I'm still going to ask you, with the campaign, very subdued election because in advertising, this time of year, this time of season is very, very big, because campaigns are coming out, people are putting out messaging, or should be. But this year, for some reason, it seems to be very subdued, other than a poster with the person's face, head and shoulders. There's very little of it happening. What do you make of why that is?
Well, I think a lot of political parties obviously have limited resources and have not wanted to, I guess, use their gunpowder ahead of announcing an election date. And I think that a lot of them have gone from a phase of awareness, because we have a lot of new parties in South Africa, almost too many new parties, to be honest, but competition is always good, I guess, to now an election campaign. And I think that we're going to see that transition kick in now for me. I think people are now going to start saying, well, we've got a short, finite period of time, and best we get out there and we start telling people what we stand for. Because, well, historically, as you know, political parties are great at telling you how useless the other parties are in their own campaigns, as opposed to telling you what they actually stand for. They are not benefit-led, a lot of them are lie-led. So, we managed to fool you into voting for us last time because we promised you all of the stuff. We know we haven't delivered it. We want you to forget about it, but hey, vote for us again. And I think that this time there's formidable competition from a lot of credible players, from a lot of people that have got established corporate histories that are entering politics to try and help the country, or former politicians that belong to other parties, that are now in new parties. Some of them good, some of them absolutely dreadful.
Well, we'll speak to the first breakaway from the ANC.
Yes,
Bantu
The very
Holomisa
first one.
in just a short while.
Second after the PAC.
Oh, that's true. But I mean, we're talking
just
post 94. Sure. You want to be, I get you. It's historically accurate.
Hey,
Give Robert Sobukwe his due. But Mike, who are you talking about and who are you watching most carefully?
So if you look at the latest polling, I don't think that it is entirely representative, by nature of polling as well, of what is likely to shake out. I mean, what we are seeing for the first time, and it is absolutely certain, is that the ANC has lost a lot of ground. And then when you look at it on a regional basis, there's obviously the entrant of our former president, and what that's going to do in terms of disrupting KZN is going to be dramatic for the ANC specifically. But when you look at new parties, for example, like Rise Mzansi, when you look at people like Musi Maimane with Bosa, when you look at a Gayton McKenzie, if you like, with Patriotic Alliance, there are these guys that are coming up and that are out there and are in the field. And Songezo Zibi's Rise Mzansi, as I mentioned before, is one of those where they have considerable, ground campaigns. They're out there, they're talking to people, they have something compelling that they're offering. Herman Mashaba's Action essay. All of these are very viable new competitors that people will sit up and take note. And then you've got the DA, of course.
But before you go into DA, a lot of people just dismiss these small parties and they say, well, they don't really have a role to play. There might be a kingmaker in a certain municipality.
Correct.
But generally they're outside the tent, and actually people should be talked out of voting for them.
Yes.
Because why waste in inverted commas? I'm not saying this is true. This is the devil's advocate argument.
Yes.
But that thought process was pioneered by a single particular individual whom I will not name, because I get so much flack for calling their shit out. But anyway.
So you obviously don't believe that. And, again, I heard the argument the other day from someone who I think is very wise about these things, said that we are a country that's extraordinarily diverse. Obviously, we need as many options as possible. People can't even decide in this country what flavor of chips we want on the shelf.
We just want tomato sauce. Okay, sorry.
But there was a huge fight about this. I mean, it even came up on the show on Friday with Simpiwe. So, of course, we want lots of options. It's not a bad thing. And if you want to vote for a little party, you're going to the polls, you're voting. Of course, it counts.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, you look at the ACDP. I mean, they're a small party, and I think they play a very valuable role, often as being, in my view, a moral barometer. And voice in our country. So I don't believe that at all. When I see the Reverend Kenneth stand up and talk, or Steve Swart, I listen to what they have to say. The same with, I think they've made a huge transition. I would have never historically spoken about the Freedom Front in an environment like that. But when you hear that, the Corne Mulders and what they're saying, they speak a lot of sense.
I mean, we had him in here when they were starting the multi-party charter, and I was like, "There's an adult in the room."
Correct.
True.
That guy knows what he's talking about, and every time I've spoken to Corne Mulder since then, I've thought, this guy is
why aren't we listening to him more?
And what we've been sold about him is actually nowhere near the truth. He's like putting the stupid kids' heads together and saying, you've got to make this work.
Correct.
I'm with you.
And so when you look at that, so where are we going? We are obviously going into a coalition government.
Yeah.
That is clear. You look at it and you think, okay, well, who are these coalitions going to be with? Is it going to be with a dominant opposition party, or is it going to be with a combination of sorts of these smaller parties? And I think that makes it very, very exciting, because what you do have for the first time in 3 decades is an opportunity for change. Now, you're not going to find more of a juggling band than me when it comes to Madiba, or when it comes to, the Oliver Tambos of this world and the Walter Sisulus and, those great icons and legends. But those days are long past. I think what South Africa needs is the values that those people represented. But certainly in terms of new opportunities, you've got to look at who represents the values that I'm looking for. And that's not a party. A party is an inanimate object. It's people.
Yeah.
So, if you have a look at a lot of these people, and I think that is where a guy like a Sonkezo Zibi gets a lot of traction, because people say, I've read his book, Manifesto, and I've read his other book, and I believe that this is a good guy. And I think there are quite a lot of good guys out there. And if they had to get together and become part of that coalition, and I think it's also a longer game. I think 2024 is the lead up to 2029.
Right.
And but I think we're going to see sizable change here. I do think so. We're going to obviously see the usual players still at the table. There's no question about that. But those smaller parties, everything, a tree, a redwood tree, a sequoia starts off as a seed or a nut, or whatever it might be that grows this thing.
We don't have 900 years.
So
a beanstalk.
Because you've spoken about Songezo and Rise Mzansi, and this is, and elections are also all about slogans and sloganeering.
Yeah.
You know where this is going. 2024 is our 1994.
Yes.
Right? When I first saw it.
Yes.
It was with Rise Mzansi, and
Yes.
I since know that it was a young man who was a T-shirt, all of that,
Yeah.
which is a wonderful story.
It's their trademark slogan.
It's trademarked. Do the EFF know that?
Yeah, because
I think they've been told. Does it make a difference?
Well, because I mean that hashtag on social media has really gained quite a lot of traction as well, and in no small part because of EFFs using it, because they have a lot of they have a lot of bots, they have a lot of people on their social platforms who are incredibly active. And so there are these two organizations using this one idea.
Yes.
It's interesting that it's trademarked and they've been told. So we'll see how that goes. But what kind of response has that slogan given, do you think, in terms of, what is it yielding? Do people care about 94? Do the young people care about 94? They weren't there.
Yeah. Well, I think where it has resonance and traction is that people understand that 1994 is the birth of democracy in South Africa. And I think that everybody wants freedom, freedom of movement, freedom of speech, freedom of thought, freedom of opportunity. And I think that, I think there was a Syrian playwright who wrote a terrible line, a very shocking and brilliant line, but a terrible one. He said, as Syrians, we are condemned to hope. And I think that so many South Africans have been condemned to hope, waiting for the promise of 1994, waiting for the promise of Tutu's Rainbow Nation. And I think that what people are doing now is it's a renewal of that hope in an entirely fresh way for me. And I think that that's what people are gravitating around. And that's why I think so many people are plagiarizing it and passing it off as their own, because they've seen that it has real traction in society to say it's possible again to change things. I think that's all it really does mean. And people are galvanized by that. Sadly, a lot of South Africans have given up hope. When you look at the amount of people who are dormant voters or unregistered voters, sadly, apropos what we were saying earlier around people uniting around something, people remain divided. Let's see how. I don't believe that. I'm not going to vote. I'm going to waste my vote. Well, actually, your grandparents and your parents fought damn hard for that vote. So don't stay at home. Use that vote. It's a gift. So I think it has traction, whether or not it's a sustaining living in a perpetual state of hope. That would be a tragedy. because that's not what the country needs. The country needs action. The country does need change. Sorry, does need positive change.
Okay, so here's the best comment so far of the morning, and it kind of ties together a lot of the things that you've been talking about. This is from Tracy, who's been listening. She says, in the upcoming elections, never forget the only difference between a rat and a squirrel is marketing. So,
True story.
who is, from the little bit that you can glean so far, selling the right message? You mentioned Songezo, but are there others?
Well, firstly, I mean, my response to Tracy is that a rat lives in a gutter and a squirrel lives in an oak tree. And I think there are different places in which to spend your life, you know, whether you are scampering up a tall tree and jumping from trees to trees, or you're running through sewers, I think you get a slightly different outcome. So that is my response. Yes, they're both rodents, but there are differences. And I think that those are the differences we need to focus on, is not sewer politics and not gutter politics, but oak tree politics, in terms of being able to ascend, to elevate, to look at the bigger picture from a higher distance, say collectively, you know, and to build a forest, you know, and that's, to me, the thing that we need to do in this country. I do think that there is a massive opportunity for change if people would allow themselves to believe that and to do that. And we've got to see the rural vote. You know, I don't know what happened over Christmas when everybody went home and spent time with their parents and their grandparents and the conversations, because I think the hopes and aspirations of Black middle class South Africa are very different today to what they were 20 years ago. And I think that there's a vibrancy in our economy, and there's a wisdom, and there's a knowledge, and there's a passion for change. And hopefully those conversations elevate people who are feeling desperate or forlorn or have given up to actually do something this time. I think it'll be a tragedy to be caught or stuck and just to remain in that, you know, place of stasis, because you don't believe change is possible. Change is always possible.
Well, that's a good place to leave that. But thank you. No, I think it's a good message, and I think it's one that we need to keep reinforcing, because it's very easy for people to slip into bad habits.
Yes.
It's like, I'll just have that one chocolate, or I'll just start becoming cynical and skeptical of everything.
Yeah, exactly right.
Good stuff. Thank you, Mike. It's good to see you, and thank you for coming to see us.
Great to be here. Thank you for having me.
Mike Abel, everybody. The podcast is called Willing and Able. You can find it on all good podcast servers. And what are you going to be covering there?
So yesterday I had a brilliant entrepreneur, Gidon Novick.
Yes.
Some people know, you know, he started
amazing.
Kalula.com. Exactly. He's now got Lyft Airlines. I flew up to Josie yesterday on Lyft, great airline. He's got Home Sweet Hotels, serial entrepreneur. He shares his entrepreneurial journey. Last week I had Mamocha Machlari, who is the executive chairman of takealot.com group. Brilliant lady, chemical engineer turned entrepreneur. Songezo Zibi was a guest of mine, and he was talking about politics in South Africa. Nick Dreyer, who he and his friend didn't know what to do with their lives, kind of stuck at mid-40s, decided to start Veldskun, the brand. And, you know, it's been this unbelievable global success. Got a lot of exciting guests coming up. I had David Kramer in the studio the other day. We had a really rich conversation about South African culture. Next week is Joanne Smolin. She's an executive coach. She uses a tool called Enneagram. I had the most unbelievable entrepreneur lady called Ayanda, who's doing incredible things with her husband in terms of educating communities. And she's also a seed investor, and she's got an accounting firm. I had Bali and Tuli. She's coming up as a guest, also talking about elections. So there's a whole host. A brilliant guy called Stephen Nathan is going to give financial advice, retirement advice, how to invest. So a wide variety of people that can, as we said earlier about Gareth, about wisdom, just a blanket of wisdom that I'm hoping, like manna, to drop on South Africa.
I like it. Thank you, Mike. Very good. Best luck with the podcast, and we will all be paying attention to that too. In a moment or two, we will get into the burning platform this morning with none other than Bantu Holomisa. Very excited to have him back on the show in our ongoing series on all the leaders of the political parties. Or Jenen. Well, remember, I've got to call him that. Mustn't get it wrong. Stick around, everybody. See you now.
This week on the Auto Trader podcast.
Look, I just remember, like, during COVID, for instance, a great example of, like, when this sort of thing, specifically the phone, and, like, things on surfaces kind of came up. That's when, for me at least, when I took real sort of appreciation of washing your hands and making sure that all the surfaces are clean. Yeah, but I mean, toilet seats, I mean, I don't know about that. The toilet seats seem kind of like disgustingly dirty. So I would never ever assume.
Why? Well, I'm going to go and say that the interior of a car is probably dirtier than just about anything and everything you can possibly think of.
Yeah.
The foot traffic that goes through your car, the surfaces, there are multiple surfaces that get touched, door handles, steering wheels, handbrakes, gear levers. It's just nasty.
Catch us every Monday at 9 a.m. on YouTube and on autotrader.co.za.
Good morning, everybody. It is time for the Burning Platform. This is where we go to meet the political leaders who are all standing for election this year, this very important election year in South Africa. And Phumi and I, along with Kanthan, are ready to take you into a discussion with someone who is a luminary and a wise elder in our political system, someone who has been there. He was one of the first people to do what has now become very trendy, to leave the ANC and start his own thing, you know, but he was the original gangster, the OG. Is that right?
Gave Julius the blueprint.
Yeah, he did. Well, he did.
Ungovernable youth.
Yeah, he did. He started it. He is none other than Bantu Holomisa. How are you, General? Yes, the General himself. Hey, Kanthan. Kanthan's here too. He just snuck in.
No, but his late is ungovernable. Should have been here 7 minutes before time. Eh?
I agree.
We need to shambok him.
Yeah. You know, you're speaking the language. One of our listeners
They're going to cut my pay here.
One of our listeners, General, has got this to say. His name is Congo Chris. He wants to start something called the Shambok Party. He says, my values include shamboks, shamboking corruption, shamboking crime, and shamboking unemployment.
No, that's my friend.
You want him on your team?
Yeah, yes.
All right. Well, first of all, how are you doing and how's the UDM?
We are okay and looking forward to participate in the forthcoming election. And I think we have complied with all the requirements of the IEC. So we are ready.
Some of these parties did not comply and have suddenly gone very quiet.
I can't wait for that list when the list finally comes out that says this is what we're looking at. This is who's going to be. I cannot wait for that list to come out.
Well, I don't think the list is important more than what message will the voters expect. So, list.
But okay, wait. We're going to have a long, full discussion about the UDM, but I do want to start here, which has nothing to do with something to do with a little bit of the UDM. But today, some of us went to bed last night with this information, and a lot of people are going to wake up this morning to the Takatso deal being over. And you were one of the very first people.
I was the only one who queried it from the start.
How do you, and so with this news?
Well, I'm happy. At least our long-term campaign has finally been successful, if I may put it that way. I wrote to the president, I wrote to SCOPA, as well as to the Portfolio Committee on Public Enterprise, saying that on what basis is this deal going to be accepted? Was this discussed at cabinet level? Did the Portfolio Committee know about this? Why are you selling a national asset of this magnitude for a song? And then Cyril Ramaphosa, if you remember, Cyril issued a statement after that saying that this deal is not yet complete. So they are still busy with due diligence. But I said, if you recall, I said, oh, this sounds like a tactical withdrawal by the president. But his minister came back again with it. But I'm happy now that he has finally, and he was nailed in the closed session by the UDM's Abayomsi Kwankwa, my deputy. And then he thought he's going to just run through it with his own colleagues. But Mr. Kwankwa raised some pertinent areas and issues with him. And he was very angry. That's why a week after that, he said he's leaving.
Is that why he's resigning? He's having a full tantrum breakdown.
It's clear that that transaction was never in a good state.
Well, if ever this is a good place, I think, to segue to, if ever there is a view of what even the smaller parties, their voice can be in parliament.
Well, that's true. In terms of numbers in parliament, we've got 2 seats, but that doesn't matter. We don't even feel that we are 2. If you listen to us, you would think that we're one of the major political parties, but we use experience. And having been head of government in Transkei then, it has taught me how to deal with some of these corrupt practices. And if you look at what we have done, starting from the time we said there has to be a legislation to replace the floor crossing legislation must go.
Yeah.
And we succeeded. There is no longer in our statute books. And we also campaigned against the chairperson of IEC, Pensita Kula, to say she must go because she has messed up there, corrupt relationship, corrupt transaction. We also went to Concord to say, if we can elect a president secretly, why can't we vote secretly if we say he or she must go? We succeeded on that. It was again the UDM which led a group of people to say electricity, this load shedding must not affect hospitals, schools, as well as police stations. So you don't have to have numbers. What is needed here is quality and consistency. I can't even talk about the campaign of calling for the president to institute commissions of inquiries. Party commission on PIC, that was a campaign of the UDM. We succeeded on that. Look at this one now. What is Tagatsi, what is it? Taga.
Taka.
So what then is on the agenda of the UDM going into these national elections?
Well, I think the first thing is that the truth of the matter is that the South Africa is in crisis. And we have to close ranks in finding a solution. That's precisely why UDM is calling for a national dialogue immediately after elections. Whether one wins with majority or through coalition, but still, let us meet and try and finish the job we didn't finish during CODESA, namely the economy of the country. And high on the agenda of that economic discussion is question of land and property. And also, we need to make sure that the civil service of South Africa is trained and exposed to sophisticated training. That includes the law enforcement agencies, as well as the NPA. So there's a lot which needs to be attended to. Of course, we have to ask ourselves, how many Black South Africans in the last 30 years have been trained or produced or as industrialists? Because if we don't invest into these 55 plus million Black South Africans, we can't be queuing every day to go and look for jobs from companies which are owned by by minority white population. We have to invest on our own people. Let's have our own entrepreneurs. Let's have these people being wealth creators so that they can create jobs.
General, I think most people who are listening right now and watching us are going to agree with just about everything that you've said so far. The question really is, how do we get from here to there when we haven't done so in the past 30 years? And I'd just like to take us back and get your view on this during the time that you were running the former Transkei. And there's still people to this day who talk about that period as the glory days in terms of the former Transkei. I have a very close friend who regularly commutes between East London and Mthatha, and is constantly harking back to the days when you were actually running that, and obviously before 1994. What did you get right at the time that subsequently fell apart, I think is the question. And more importantly, how do you then take those things and implement them again?
Well, it's about a discipline, first of all, from the leadership you work with. And also, if you say any minister who is involved in issuing a directive laced with corruption to say a certain tender must be given to so-and-so, that minister must immediately pack his bag and leave. So fortunately, I've never had that experience. They listened to me. I said the role of a minister is to do an oversight. The DGs are the accounting officers. Right now, the powers of the DGs have been usurped by the political heads of almost every department. So that is why the level of corruption is so high in this country, because the ministers have usurped the powers of those accounting officers. So what we need to do now is to instill discipline from top to bottom and put time frames. If you have agreed about a plan, the implementation of that plan must be done such that you put time frames, especially if you have a budget, to say, this is the plan from this department, the presidents, which is responsible for monitoring of the departments and ministers and so on, should be doing their work. And also, if you draw a line and say, please, don't cross that line, people must listen to you.
But this starts with the president, doesn't it? And
that's why I'm saying, that's why I'm saying, if the discipline is not there from the top, don't expect the ministers and other people in the government to toe the line.
Why you mention the president, Kenton? Why do you have to spoil a nice conversation?
So I mentioned the president, Gareth, just simply because the way in which our parliamentary system is structured right now, we don't actually have the capacity to hold the ministers accountable, because the ministers in themselves are appointed by the president. And the president generally ignores whatever comes out of parliament in terms of whether or not the ministers themselves are doing their jobs, which is why this entire SAA fiasco was possible in the first place, because parliament is not in a position to hold the individual ministers accountable. And I don't know whether you have a solution, General, in terms of what type of
look at
changes need to happen in parliament, I guess.
No, there's no need to change it in parliament. But if parliament approves the legislation, they make laws. But who is implementing the laws? It's the executive. I mean, if a minister, we say Minister X is not performing, the president has to assess that. Unfortunately, he is the one who recently said, I cannot publish the assessments of these ministers because they are going to embarrass my party and my government. He should have been told to leave himself. So this is serious. I mean, look at the speaker currently. He's running around all over the world because he doesn't want to be arrested. Policemen are looking for him. And we wrote a letter. We wrote a letter to the president to say, this person, this Minister of Defense has done A, B, C, D, E. Can't you investigate? And he kept quiet. Instead, he rewarded him with the most important position of being a speaker. No, these people are almost the same.
So what are the priorities? Because Phumi always asks this question to make it fair for everybody who comes in. And the UDM has obviously got its list of priorities. And Phumi will read, the manifestos of these things. But most people, General, are not going to read this stuff. So they want you to make it easier for them.
Listen, there are at least two, one app and one website that I've since discovered that will do the work for you,
right?
And just give you the salient points. I'm just saying.
Okay, well, there's AI, right?
There is AI.
But what are your main priorities? And for the people who will vote UDM, what do you think the messages are that they're going to want to hear?
Well, the people are concerned, firstly, about their safety.
Yes.
So, secondly, the people are also concerned about high levels of corruption, because this corruption money should have been used to create jobs for other people. And this money should have been used to fix our infrastructure in terms of maintenance. And then the other one is a question of lawlessness. I mean, sometimes it's a cultural shock for some of us who are trained in the military, where one can just block a highway with a truck and then start robbing a vehicle which is carrying money in broad daylight. So, which means this corruption now has even affected the law enforcement agencies. As you have seen, people now are scared to stop in roadblocks if they are stopped by people who are wearing police uniform. You ask yourself a question, are they the real police? And so on. So that kind of setup has to be attended to. The last one, of course, is the question of our energy, load shedding and so on. And we don't seem to be moving fast to solve it. I mean, for the last 15 years, and then we've been told different stories. The reason why there's load shedding is because the coal is wet, the maintenance, and something has tripped, and so on. No, ANC has been lying to us. And the best way to solve that would be, one, we've gotten bilateral agreements with many countries. If we have a new government, I would say, let's go to those 2 countries, give them an assignment for free to assess what is the problem of our ESCOM. And then having those 2 reports, then you can at least start to solve the problem from an informed position. Remember that the issue of deploying cadres in all the institutions of government in South Africa has affected the performance because they were not screened, they are not competent, and they don't qualify. Starting from the time Hitachi was given the tender to build Kusile and Medupi. Guess what? Hitachi came up with the Chancellor House in their pocket. Chancellor House don't even have one single engineer. But they ran away with what, 38 billion rands? So, Jesus. And Chancellor House is an ANC investment arm. So now, if you're a government, then you are going to sit and plan to loot state resources. Then you must give up.
General, I hear you. I hear you on the safety and the lawlessness and corruption, and all of those are very valid and very pressing issues. But I don't hear you talk about unemployment, which
I did mention
sitting with. So what's your plan around unemployment?
The issue of unemployment is a complex one. First of all, we will have to look at the areas where we can invest as a state. In other words, the state has to play a role, private sector has to play a role. It's simple. What the network is doing has failed this country because you always have tensions and mistrust between the government. Is not trusted by business because they think it's too close to the labor, vice versa. Labor don't trust the the government, they say it's too close to the big business. So we need to start from there and say, guys, what role can the big business play in creating jobs and where, in which areas, and what will be the role of the state? Take, for instance, after these rains, I'm just talking about the low-level LSMs. After these heavy rains, if you go to the rural areas, the soil erosion which has taken place there is massive. And then you also look at our rivers in those areas. You need to reinforce those areas. You can create thousands of jobs for the people in that category. And then you look at the kids who have who qualified, for instance, let's say on hospitality industry. Others are artists. Others are background artists. Others are fashion designers. Why don't we invest in that category as a state? So there's a lot. And then obviously we have to have a fund, a national fund, to address those issues. And secondly, you also need to look at the companies from outside. What kind of incentives can you draw or can you bring up so that those people come and invest in South Africa? Or the companies which are in big cities, what incentives would you bring or put on table if you say, go to rural areas or east provinces which are rural, well, KwaZulu-Natal, Limpopo.
General, I'd like to come in on this point though, because a lot of what you're saying is to a large extent what in fact, the ANC has been saying for the past 30 years in terms of we need this partnership between the public sector and the private sector. We need to put in these programs that are going to empower the youth. We need to create a sovereign wealth fund effectively.
But
and look, to a large extent, if you go back to the Mbeki, no, for sure. But if you go back to the Mbeki era, when we had a budget surplus, and at that point, there was the possibility of creating a sovereign wealth fund. Instead, we put that money into social grants. So that was a decision that was taken back then. But on the question of jobs itself, so my take on jobs, very simply, is that the single thing that prevents jobs right now is a minimum wage. The very simple thing, because we have a deficit in terms of the number of jobs, but we put the price of bringing someone into the job market so high that most businesses can't afford it. So I'd like to hear what's your take on the question of a minimum wage. Do you support it? And also then, if we look in terms of our labor laws generally, one of the big problems that we have right now, and I say this as a person who's employed hundreds of people over my career, one of the things that actually holds back business from wanting to employ people is the fact that it is so difficult to fire people for incompetence, the very issues that you are raising. So I'd like your feedback on that.
Minimum wage, yes, is has to be respected, but there are certain categories, if I were to talk about that. If I start a business this year, and then immediately, even before the results have been announced as to whether I'm making profit or not, and then you say, from the start, you talk about a minimum wage, but depending on what kind of business. But for small businesses in particular, I think we need to review that, because people tend to be disillusioned by this and thus employ their own families.
But the problem with that is, let's say you start a small business and the small business becomes successful. If that small business wants to grow into a large business, they actually can't afford to do so, because then if they move into another category where it puts them into a higher wage bracket, the bottom falls out, and it becomes self-reinforcing that we have this constant buildup of small businesses that are never able to grow, just simply because
the answer to your question is simple. As a leader of a country, of government, you listen to people. If people are saying, let's review this legislation, that legislation is not cast in stone. It would have to be open for discussion. That's the answer I can give you.
Fair enough.
So can I ask a question quickly about something? And one of our listeners here says that the UDM in Gqeberha was among the most corrupt, and that municipality has been a disaster ever since. As someone who gave the UDM a vote in the past, I am jaded when you mention corruption. And the UDM has had to make bedfellows sometimes, which people question. This will happen more and more in coalition governments. People are going to find themselves having to compromise. Do you want to address that quickly?
Quickly, the UDM was not in charge of the municipality. It was a DA-led coalition. But the DA accused Bobani, who was our member working with Mr. Trollip, that he is suspected of being corrupt. And then Bobani said, no, you also bought a house for 3 million cash. So that kind of accusation to and from. And then we met as leaders. And then I said to the leaders of the coalition, these people are messing up this project. The best thing is that we must remove both of them, Trollip and Mr. Bobani. But DA flatly refused. Okay. I said, okay, if you now saying so-and-so has stolen money or what, please take him to the council. The ethics committee must review that. Secondly, report this individual to the police. DA did that, and they raided the offices of Mr. Bobani, and they didn't get it. I don't know what they found, but we gave them chance, and we told Bobani that, not Bobani, the whole South Africa, if this person is arrested, we'll suspend him immediately.
Mm.
That's a position which we put. We were not sangomas to say, yes, can you breathe and say, did you do this or not do this? He denied it from us. He said, no, I'm not corrupt. And then we said, your fate will be decided by the council and by the courts.
Right.
And well, I suppose one of the things that this raises, which everyone is cognizant of, is that we're going definitely post the election to find ourselves with multiple forms of coalitions of one form or another. Do you think that we have the political maturity to make it work eventually?
The short answer is we don't, Phumi. Come on, we don't have the political majority.
Kanthan, let the man speak for himself.
At national level, I'm optimistic it will work. In fact, we are going back to what Mr. Mandela and de Klerk once proposed for this country, government of national unity. Immediately, checks and balances will be in place. And also the people who will be ministers, at least the caliber of that group, is not the same as at local government level. Some of the councillors don't even know how to read this document and regulations. So we have learned one or two things in the coalitions at local government. At national level, if it's there, it's going to work. You will call me, yeah, it's going to work. I've been there before.
What do you make of the talk of two coalitions forming broadly in South African politics? The one being the multi-party charter group of people, and on the other side, we've got this ANC. Will they ever be able to come to terms with Zuma's MK? The EFF, what role will they play? Will those three band together? Could be very powerful if they did, for them.
Well, I think when you talk about the forthcoming coalition possibilities, there are three streams I see. It's one led by the current tripartite alliance, ANC alliance partners. Second one will be the one led by DA, called Moonshot or whatever. What did you call it?
Multi-party
charter. And then the third one will be the group which is on the left of the ANC, which I think is needed to keep the ANC on check. There you can possibly see MK, EFF, ZAPO, DAC, ATM, UDM. I'll be comfortable in that category because the ANC has abandoned the original agenda and we have to sit on them. In order for Parliament to be effective, that is the crowd which on the left of the ANC, which understands the passage of the struggle. Some of us will continue to remind them. The more we are, more people who understands the original position of the ANC, the better. So there will be these three streams. So if, for instance, ANC comes to DA, they can agree and form a government. Or if ANC comes to the other crew, they will put conditions. They can agree and run South Africa. I'm not worried about this, but the sooner these elections come, the better.
And what are your chances in these elections?
Well, the United Democratic Movement has been betting on a wicket of promoting ethics of good governance, have been betting on a wicket of anti-corruption. Earlier on, when we began, I listed our successes. So why would a South African or a voter ignore a person who has been helping the democracy of South Africa, notwithstanding that we don't have big numbers, but we have been coming up with quality debates, introducing quality debates. So I expect, therefore, that the voters of South Africa will say, hey, Holomisa and UTM has been teaching us, creating awareness on this. So we've hit them for 6s and 4s while we were occupying the crease. I've just told you now that a national speaker is running all over. He was in France last week, police waiting for him. This week, we're told he's in USA. So that's UTM.
You're going to get him.
Daga is off.
General, you mentioned two things that I think are unique to all the conversations we've had with other leaders. We had Kenneth Meshwe here last week. We had Herman Mashaba. We've spoken to Gayton McKenzie. And we're talking to as many of the leaders as we can, whether we'll get the big three in here. They're very arrogant, all three of them. But we'll try and get them in. You mentioned the rural areas. You have a strong support in the rural Eastern Cape. And most people are just disregarding and ignoring the rural areas. In fact, they're even saying, well, the parties like the ANC that are losing the urban vote are going to be condemned to be rural parties. And then we'll forget about them because clearly those people don't prioritize rural areas. So that's one thing I want to ask you some more about. The other word that you used was discipline, a word that not many other parties have used. And it comes from your military background. And some people in this country are now full and they need someone who's got some principle and some discipline and can instill some discipline in the rest of this country because that is missing. You see the way the place looks filthy, see the way people conduct themselves on the roads badly. There are a lot of conservative, sensible South Africans who have family values at the center of maybe the church at the center of their moral compass. And they want someone who can enforce some rules. Is that not your strongest asset?
Well, speaking to a converted, because even our manifesto is addressing the issues related to lack of waste management, and that South Africa is filthy, is dirty,
it's a dump.
It's one of the dirtiest countries in the continent. If you go to, in fact, some of you witnessed when I was in charge in Transkei. During public holidays, we would say people must clean their homes. They must clean highways, soldiers and police clean highways. And we ran a nice environment set up there. I wish one can arrange with the SANDF.
What's left of it?
Yes, just take, for instance, traditional leaders and some councillors, fly them to Rwanda and see the rural areas of Rwanda. See the urban setup. It's a Singapore of Africa, if I can say so. Just to go and say, how do you inculcate a culture of ownership? See how is it implemented? Then come back to your municipality. Maybe they will wake up a little bit. Yes, you need to be strong. Discipline starts from the leader, cabinet, DGs. It's like time frame. When you say, let's agree on a deadline to implement this. And then on the eve of implementation, you find that the DG is not ready. It's lack of discipline.
Well, I'm speaking of discipline, I'm also thinking about the number of young people we have on our voters' roll.
Mm-hmm.
Do you think that message of discipline will excite enough young people to show up at the polls for you?
Well, the youth of today is. I'm happy with the way they are. They seem to understand now that the future belongs to them, and they need to shape it now. I'm optimistic that the youth of South Africa this time around will go out in numbers to vote. And we must also thank the initiative by Malema. Remember that the EFF was formed by the youth and where it is today. So that should also encourage the youth of South Africa in general.
But at the same time, General, speak of the EFF and discipline at the same time is there's a bit of a contradiction there. And in fact, I would go so far as to say that one of the biggest problems that we have right now is the complete lack of discipline on the part of the likes of the EFF.
Well, if each political party has got its own tactics, so if you are going to come up with your own Bible and just pray every day, those boys have actually changed the political landscape of this country.
But not necessarily for the better.
That's fine. That's fine. I'm not sure what to about that. But question of discipline, you cannot only say it's only this party. The whole society of South Africa is a breakdown. Even elders.
That's fair enough, and I'm agreeing with you.
Even elders, if you see them on the highways or in town, there's just an anger across the board.
You see, the reason why I mentioned the EFF in particular is because when you were describing the positioning of the political parties just now, and you drew the segmentation, shall we say, which are of parties to the left of the ANC, where you included the UDM, the EFF, the ATM, and so forth. And so, yes, I'm accepting that there's a complete lack of discipline at the other end of the spectrum. But if you are seeing yourself potentially in the same category to the left of the ANC, working with the likes of the EFF, and we have the EFF with this track record of a complete lack of discipline, a complete failure to respect the basic rules of decorum in Parliament. And how would you see yourself working together?
My brother, don't worry about that. Holomisa grew up in the environment of respecting the rules of government.
And going with his shambok.
Now, if we are discussing about establishing a cabinet, there has to be standards set first before and screening of the cabinet members. And to say, guys, if you do this, you don't toe the line, gate. Right? Simple.
Sounds like my dad.
I don't have any other way of describing the way.
Would you shambok Julius Malema if necessary?
No. Julius Malema is a leader of a party. Now, if we sit down,
I would shambok our president given the chance, and that's why I mention it.
Let him finish his thought. Julius Malema is a leader of a party.
Tanthan just wants to shambok everyone.
He is a leader of the party. If we're talking about forming a government of national unity or coalition, we are going to draw the rules together. So if I mess up, then I should also be able to say, guys, I leave. So I'm not going to talk about, I'm not a Sangoma. But when you talk about a new government, the rules have to be, we have to lead by example, let me put it that way. If you have got a problem with Mr. Malema or EFF, that's your own baby. But here, people vote for that party. I say the youth of South Africa are now ready to vote. They have been shunning politics in the past, but give a credit where it is due. Malema started a political party, and that party was full of youth, and they are there. Now,
that's fair comment.
I saw a video on social media a couple of days ago with the young Duduzane Zuba. He came to see you.
Duduzane?
Are you willing to share with us what
your meeting? You guys are curious.
It's our job.
Curious.
Sizithanda over indaba zabantu.
Yeah. You like call it a high level gossip.
It was interesting, but I could never in 1,000 years would have considered that he would do that. To come and see you, and I'm just curious what the conversation was about and what advice you have for a young person with his multicolored, checkered background wanting to get into politics.
Well, we didn't discuss politics really with him. Duduzane grew up with my kids in Pretoria then, before he left for KZN or whatever. So he was in Pretoria. He felt that he should just pop in. Came in. I don't even think he spent 10 minutes.
Oh, wow.
He just said, I'm in town. How are you? And so on. And then I said, Mr. President, wish you all the luck. And then he saluted and left.
Yeah.
Well, and that's interesting because the portrayal of just that little interaction was really one that, from his telling, was coming to you for advice and endorsement. And this is the information that is then sitting out in the public sphere that then says you've endorsed this young man, you shook his hand, you had this big conversation. And had we not had this conversation with you, we wouldn't know that this is what actually transpired.
But there's nothing wrong in really to be a father of all. Look, I was invited, for instance, to go and say and pass a message during the launch of the EFF. You remember in Rustenburg. And then in the opposition in parliament, the parties, they will always say, Bantu, can you call a meeting of the opposition parties? During 2016 election, we chased away ANC in the metros. I brought along EFF on the far left, Freedom Front Plus on the far right. And I said, guys, let's compare the numbers. We added them. We ended up saying ANC must go in the metros. We chased them away. So the people do have this, I don't know whether it's trust, but they like to consult me.
Well, you are. You've been there a long time. You know things, and it's unassailable to many that you have had relationships from the very early days in the 90s with all of these leaders, and throughout when new leaders have come up, you've made an effort to get to know them.
For instance, I attack the president hard, but we play golf when we have time.
Yeah, but that
golf?
is politics.
And you'll never see that in the continent.
Are you better at golf than him? Just gotta know. Who's better? I see you wearing the Bantu Holomisa golf shirt. So
I know, yes. He plays a good golf.
Oh.
No, does he?
But it's just that you can see he's got no time for it.
Oh.
He's got no time for many other things.
Yes, he's busy.
Even his full-time job, he's got no time for. But bringing together different parties and bringing them to the table to start something is one thing. What we've seen in the metros, in the falling apart of those coalitions, has been a lack of somebody to hold it together. And do you think that you have that role to play?
Yes, I will continue to play that role because I'm not ambitious for positions. All I need is look at the South Africa, look at our municipalities. But unfortunately, my experience with DA on coalitions, as well as ANC to some extent, they always want to play a big brother mentality and to say, pretend as if they have won elections. And I've been telling them that it's not going to work, but try and negotiate and agree and implement the policy. But of course, the destabilization of local government, metros, and so on is done by the ANC. They vowed after we chased them away to say we'll make these ungovernable, and they've achieved that. They've achieved that.
General, I'd like to do a bit of a historical note here. You started the UDM with Rolf Meyer, and I'm curious as to whether you still maintain contact with Rolf Meyer and how your views have either come together or moved apart from the time you founded the UDM.
Rolf Meyer is a gentleman, very disciplined individual. And when he left, he told me he had a family problem. Then he decided to say, I don't want this thing to be in the media and so on. I'd rather quietly leave, right? So he left. And then the ANC government made use of his services by going to countries where there's conflict to mediate and so on.
Yes, the Ireland conflict.
Yes, so he is one of a rare species, which is a good listener. So I meet him now and again, either in the functions or airport, and we chat. So he's still the same Rolf Meyer. I wish you had many Rolf Meyers in the DA who would be far by now. But sometimes you begin to question the way they tackle issues. You see, when you have a government in the foreign policy, even if you differ, you don't publicly take a government, because if a government take a decision on foreign policy, you may differ with them, but you have a chance to engage them in parliament. Look at this thing when they wrote to USA. The same thing when they, on the issue of Middle East. If I were the leader of the DA, I would knock at the office of the president when I differ with him, so that we present this united front on issues of national interest. I find that it is lacking in this country. And of course, Cyril Ramaphosa is not even briefing us. Sometimes you can understand the frustrations by some.
It's a good point you raise, but one of the rebuttals that has come on the part of the DA, and I'd like your insight on this because you've been associated with the ANC for years. One of the rebuttals from the DA is, why should we not be approaching the United States because of the fact that the ANC is deeply in bed with the likes of China and Russia? And do you have any insights on whether that is in fact the case? And is there foreign money coming into our country right now? Because I personally am of the view that there shouldn't be foreign money influencing our elections at any level, whether it's the DA or the ANC.
The way I see it is that it's going to be difficult to control that sphere. Because you take, for instance, the relationship between ANC and Palestine. It's well documented.
Yes, but that was not with Hamas. It was with the Palestinian Authority and the PLO before that.
Yes, wait. I say to you, there are historic relationship between political parties in this country and other countries elsewhere, ideologically and whatever you want to call it. But when it comes to issues of the nation, the country, our foreign policy, if there's going to be an action taken, the president of South Africa should call leaders and say, I'm proposing A, B, C, D, E. There might be controversies here, and so on. That's what I'm praying. That's what Madiba used to do anyway.
Yes, but I think also Canton's point about foreign money. We're always worrying about the sovereignty of our country. And you saw there was this huge storm in a teacup this week about the election observers that were called by. Look, the DA sometimes gets the messaging wrong. Some parties get it wrong more than others.
Yes.
But what if Russia and China are directly funding one of the parties, or Iran for that matter, are directly funding one of the parties?
Well, frankly, it doesn't matter who it is.
No, we don't want foreign powers or even NGOs. Frankly,
no, the funding, the rules in this country is that you must declare. That's point number one. But if you are going to take a government jet and fly to Saudi Arabia and then bring dollars here and keep them in your house, that is wrong.
If that were to happen. if.
So the question of the foreign money is coming to South Africa to fund political parties. Maybe our party funding legislation is not tight enough, because it should also have a rider to say, if you do this and you don't declare, you will be disqualified to participate in the election.
Penalties. And who funds the UDM?
The UDM is funded by IEC as well as the Parliament constituency, and then I fundraise from my friends. But more importantly, the UDM in the last 26 years, I've been using my property in Umtata and Mkanduli to provide security with guarantee. So then UDM can take millions there and run the elections, and then they pay back the bank. Until then, my property is free. I don't have time to move around and ask for money. But I saw others now are getting, new parties are getting millions and millions. So I've also written letter also asking from this from these big companies who are doling them.
Yeah. But they're giving to others, they must give to
but I will declare. So
so this raises one question which I also asked Kenneth Meshwe about. You have been at the head of the UDM since inception. Currently you have 2 seats in Parliament. You hold the one. What is the UDM's succession plan outside of you? When you are no longer there and your properties and all of the work that you do, is the UDM going to die with you?
I don't think UDM will die with me, because if you look at the youth I'm promoting, the deputy president is young, and if you have watched him speaking, you won't say this is a young person, it's matured. The Secretary General currently is 35 years old. Last year, he wrote his master's. If you look at the other councillors, they are graduates from WUSU, University of Fort Hare, those who are in the Eastern Cape. So I'm satisfied with the succession plan. The question is, you see, this democracy sometimes is not right, because the parties you want to leave, and then the structures say, no, we want to vote for you to continue as a leader. That's democracy.
Listen, the IFP are currently struggling with who they put on their posters.
I saw Mangosuthu Butele, is he still on the posters? Sure.
Listen,
all this slogan is do it for Sheke.
Jesus Christ is on the cross in every church 2,000 years later.
So at the right time, my sister, at the right time, my time will come to leave. And I can't wait to go and play golf and travel around the country. I still need to tour South Africa. People don't know South Africa. It's a beautiful country.
Yes, it is. Yes, it is.
Let's keep it that way. Let's make it better still. All right, General, let's get you in there to keep these people disciplined, these children.
Mm-hmm.
And thank you for coming to see us this morning.
Thank you very much.
Lots of questions we didn't get a chance to ask you, but you've answered everything that we wanted to know this morning, and it's good to see you again.
When are you launching your campaign? We just spoke with the marketer, advertising man in the last hour, and he said maybe everybody is waiting now that we know the date. When is your campaign being launched?
I've been campaigning since last year.
So what's your campaign message? What's your slogan this year?
The slogan of the UTM says, corruption destroys our freedom.
That's about right.
There you go.
I would change it to Shambok the Bastard.
Order, comrades.
All right, on that note, thank you, everybody. We will